Hello, I'm Javis Lewis and welcome back to a little mini series about how to make that logo in Blender. We started with a rasterized image there 2 videos ago, then we extruded that in Blender and we've already replicated some grass along our plane. We built the grass, we replicated the grass, but currently it just looks trist and gray. So let's see how we can add some color to our image there before we carry on. So let me get out of this rendered viewport, and rather than heading over into the solid viewport or solid viewport shading mode, I'm going to head over to the material preview, and that looks a little bit disconcerting. I'm going to take the lock of the camera away, and in fact this whole plane away, and everything is just white and it's a bit overkill, isn't it? And that's just because all these objects are currently white and we don't really want to do that. Let me switch over to my grass stalk here, which is also white. That's what I was looking for, the dot. That's the period key, period. To change that into something sensible, I'm going to have to display some nodes here. And what I like to do is this currently is the viewport configuration default. I'd like to leave that and just add another one and just hit the plus button and it says default 001. And I'd like to change that. So I'm going to add another viewport. So this can be my regular viewport and this can be my nodes viewport. And Blender is really easy to accommodate that. So I'm going to change this to a node editor, and then I'm going to press N to make sure this thing goes away. And here to see a little bit more, I'm just going to hover on press T so that that pane goes away. So now I can see my object, and I can see, I'm going to call that maybe node editor, or just nodes perhaps. That's cool. Nodes is funky. So I can't see anything in here because right now we're not displaying any nodes. With my grass object selected, let's head over to this little kind of ball icon. I don't really know what it means. Perhaps it's just the material icon, and we see that no materials are defined. Click the new button here and that'll define one, and it's appropriately named material.001. Let's call it grass. And we can see that a node has sprung up which corresponds to the surface properties of our object here. And that's why this is showing up white now. We can click in here and select a color. So perhaps something like a nice green, not too light. Make that a nice juicy grassy green, like so. And you can see that this is now the color we're seeing. Currently this is just one diffuse node, so nodes, shader nodes, they can be really complex, but we're going to keep it nice and simple. We're just going to add one shader here and create a glossy shader, which is perhaps kind of an orangey yellow bit. And now I'm going to mix those two together with another shader, namely a mix shader. And if I drop that directly onto my first shader, then it gets put right in the middle there. I connect the second shader to it, and now this is kind of mixed together. That's what I want. And that's all the shader color variation I want from this object right now. So if I select my ground, then I can see that there's nothing defined here either. I can't even see my ground here because that's on a different layer. Let me go back to here where I can see my grass in situ. The grass is already greened in. With my ground selected, I'd like that to be perhaps brown. So I'm going to create another material here and call that ground. And that can just be a diffuse, super simple diffuse shader. A brown is just technically an orange, really. That's made very dark. And there we go. That's what I'm looking for here. Just so that there's something there on the places where we may see through it. And then of course we have our DAZ Studio logo, which we're going to cover with something else. For now, perhaps I'm just going to give it another simple shader. I'm going to use nodes here as well. And instead of that being gray, perhaps I'm going to give it something like an orange. Just to see if that actually works. Perhaps something yellowish, yellow-orange, something like that. Just so that we can see it. With this in place, I can change back to my default view And the beauty of that is if I now need to fiddle with any of the shaders, I just have another viewport that's defined just like that. So I can go back and forth between these types of views here. That's very nice. So that's that. Let's see what this looks like in the rendered viewport. And we can see now that because of the colors, it looks like I may need a bit more light in here. So I can increase and strengthen the quality of the light. I could also, instead of having the DAZ Studio logo to be a diffuse shader, I could perhaps add another glossy shader to it and turn that into like a block of gold or something that the Incas have found, something, you know, something like that. As it's being rendered, I can see it's kind of coming together, but most of the field of grass is still very dark. So let's see if we select the lamp and then head over to the lamp properties here, the light properties. I can just increase that to perhaps 2000. Let's see what that looks like. If I find that this is a little bit too much on this side, I can always put the light a little bit higher onto the scene. I may actually do that and then see what that's going to look like. Again, if I needed a second viewport that is unshaded, so I can see the light, I can see the light and the non-light version side by side, that's kind of a good idea too. I can just open another viewport like that, and so I can just drag this up and I can see the immediate preview of what the effect of that is. So perhaps I will actually rotate this around. Actually, I liked it when it came from the side. Maybe all I need to do is just rotate this around the x-axis a little bit and give some of that other stuff more like now. It's the same effect, isn't it? That's not really what I'm looking for. Yeah, this is just a little bit too bright for my liking, so I think I need to tone this down again to maybe 1600. Even 1500 was probably okay. It's one of those things. Perhaps I can move it away a little bit. That'll also do a trick. But I do like the dramaticness that we do get some shadows to come over here. I think I may even rotate this around the z-axis to somewhere like this, and then perhaps move the light over to here so that we get a bit of shadow impression here. It's a bit of trial and error, but the more dramatic it looks, I think it will really help that logo. The grass, that this is not as densely populated down here. We've covered that in the previous video. We're going to increase the density of the grass, but as a guide for now, I think we're okay here. Now, speaking of the replicator, let's see if we can put something else onto the DAZ Studio logo. Perhaps we're going to use some kind of, just a simple object like a sphere object, and that will, if we replicate this densely enough, then it'll look like a fungal type growth because all the spheres are going to be blending into each other. Let's see how to do that. Now, first of all, we can close one of these viewports down. Oops, that's not what I meant. Let's close them down like so. And no, it's like so. There we go. There. Now we've only got this viewport, and I'm going to follow the same pattern that we had before. There's this the layer options here. On the third layer, I'm going to replicate another object that I want to use so that the scene is kind of clear here. So Shift A brings this menu up in which I can create just a simple UV sphere, and it doesn't have to be that dense either. So segments, I suppose, 8 and 8 will be just fine. Perhaps maybe we'll make it 12 and 8 so that it's nice and uniform. There, that's cool. We're going to scale this thing. We're going to scale this thing down a little bit so that we have something like that. And I think I'm going to leave the pivot point right in the center of the object for now. Perhaps while we're here, let's just give this guy a material as well on the nodes thing. This is what it looks like with the sphere selected on the material tab. Let's call this one gold perhaps. And to make gold, it's almost like what we did before. We're going to use 2 more shaders. One is a mix shader that we're going to pop right in here, and another one is the glossy shader. And the trick then is to mix it more towards the glossy version than it is towards the matte version. So we could use a 100% glossy shader, but I think that may just be overkill. So gold looks mainly yellow, yellowy orange, something like that, in a very kind of bright sense. Let's make it that is almost white. I don't want to make it too saturated, so I want to give it just a goldish glow here, something like that. And then most of it is done with the diffuse map here, which is something like that. Let's go back to the default viewport here, change that to layer 1, and with the DAZ Studio logo now selected, let's head over back to our particle emitter tab where there's nothing there, because currently we're not replicating anything on the DAZ Studio logo. So let's create new and do the whole thing again. So under emitter, we're going to select hair. Then under emission, let's close everything down here, and under hair, let's say advanced, and let's close that down as well. And this is now growing hair out of the DAZ logo. Oh, that's horrible. It's terrible. Under render, let's select the object. In our case, that's the sphere. And you can see what DAZ Studio is doing there. So now we're replicating spheres here. Oh yes, also with the sphere, so that we don't see the faces, let's go and select smooth shading so that it's a bit more smooth here. There we go. That looks even better. Select the DAZ Studio logo again, and therefore the particle system. Under emission, let's see if we can crank up the number of spheres even more. So there we go, that's what it looks like. And we can see in a moment how we can make sure that more objects are replicating on other parts here. But for now, let's just play with this. Rotation isn't important here, but the way we dealt with random size is kind of interesting. So let's introduce that and see what we can do there, and also see what happens when we make that bigger. Look at that, that's kind of cool. So I can make these bigger and then introduce the random scale, random size here, and see if that's something that we want to use. Perhaps this is a bit too big now. The sphere may be a little bit too big, so let's see if we can just make it a bit smaller. Whatever floats your boat. I think we need more spheres, and also we need to teach the replicator that on the sides we don't really want to see that. We just want to see more on the top and kind of an even distribution on the side. So let's see how we can make that happen. There's two ways of dealing with that issue that we have. First of all, perhaps we're going to switch the grass off so that we can only focus on one replicator at a time. And to do that, we need to select the ground and then head over to the very top of the particle system where we can see this little eye icon. If I just switch that off, then that part of the replicated scene isn't displayed. That makes it easier on the computer's resources to maneuver the scene and all that. So that's a good way of doing it. Switch this on and off, and I could do the same if I select the DAZ Studio logo, and if I don't want to see this, then that all disappears. Notice the little eye icon and the camera icon. The camera means that it will appear in the rendered version, and the eye icon means it'll appear in the preview, in the viewport. So I can switch something off, like the grass. I can switch that off for now, but then when I go and render it, the grass will still come out. So that's a very nice way of working there. But back to the DAZ Studio logo, and why is there nothing replicated on the side of the logo? Well, it appears that we have a couple of options of how to replicate these objects, and they're under the Emission tab. We have what we've selected as faces, that's kind of the default, but there's also vertices and volume. And look at what happens if I switch to volume, then I can see a very different distribution all over the object. It may not be appropriate, but it's one of those things that I can now see. So it appears as if with volume, between volume and faces, the objects are now replicated more inside the object, and they protrude to the outside as well. But mainly I can see that some of these spheres, even the larger ones, are happening on the inside of my 3D object. And so I guess that's what it's doing. It's now looking at the whole volume of this thing. Faces really only looks at the sides of the object and only reproduces things on top of polygons. And then vertices will do that only along the vertices. And I guess here's the issue. The geometry of the logo looks as if I've literally just extruded it from here, and this is my next step. So the geometry isn't great. It's literally just an extruded thing that doesn't have any edge loops. So what I can do to rectify this situation is just insert some edge loops into the DAZ Studio logo, and then select as many edge loops as I want. And I also have to do the same on top of here. So perhaps a subdivision is a nice way of doing that. perhaps let's see if it works. I've never tried it out, so it would be nice to do that together with you now. So there we go. With the DAZ Studio logo selected, let's go into edit mode and select everything and see what happens if we just subdivide the object. I don't really know where the subdivision thing even is, so I can press the space bar and I can say subdivide. There we go. Oh, that's perfect. Mesh subdivide. That's exactly what I want. So if I do that, more subdivisions are happening more or less randomly. So I'm getting one extra edge loop and I'm getting lots of other things. It's not perfect, but it will just subdivide wherever it can. So if I head out of edit mode and I make sure I'm in the vertices thing, I can see that the edge loop that was inserted here has now yielded more replication along that edge loop. So I guess that is an indicator that this is probably what I need to do. Let's insert more edge loops. So back into edit mode, and in here we can use an option of Blender that's called loop cut and slide. That's a very funky way of adding edge loops into objects, and I do that by hitting Control R. And now when I hover, I can select where my edge loops need to appear. It looks like I can only do that kind of letter per letter. I don't really know why. If there's a way to do it for the whole object, I had expected that to happen. I can hover down here where the S is, and then when I roll my mouse button up or down, there'll be more edge loops inserted, more or less. So I can add as many as I like. So in my case, I'm just going to add another 2 perhaps, and then I just click, and that's that. And then I can select the position of them. So I just select and click that again, and perhaps I'm just going to do that all over these bottom letters here. So again, Control R, 2 steps, tap, tap, and Control R, 2 steps, tap, tap, and Control R, 2 steps, tap, tap. And whoops, I keep doing that, don't I? So escape will bring you out of that, and then Control Z will bring you 1 step back. So Control R, roll 2 up, tap, tap, and then 1 more here, Control R, tap, tap, or 2 up, tap, tap, and that should be that. So as soon as we go out of edit mode, we see that there's more stuff being replicated on the bottom. So if I repeat that process now here at the top of these, as well as perhaps at the top of the DAZ letters, I think we should be up to a good start. Let me just do that quickly. There, that wasn't so bad. And we've got a lot of weird growth here. Very cool. Let's increase what we have so that there's more stuff happening on the word DAZ. But we can do that again. We can do that under the emission thing, and we can also fiddle with the size of our sphere, and then we'll see if that's what we're looking for. There we go. Perhaps this is kind of enough for me now, and you can of course fiddle with it as much as you like. Let's see what happens when we look at this through the camera and through the rendered viewport, of course, and which we can also take into consideration what the grass would now look like. Without the grass displaying, your rendered viewport is going to be a bit quicker. So I can see that perhaps the light is a bit strong, or perhaps the color isn't dark enough, or perhaps together with the grass, perhaps this is just what the doctor ordered. Let's have a look. If we add the grass as well and increase the patchiness of the grass to something like 5,000 or 10,000 even, we can see that it's all coming together here. I think the light could be a little bit warmer so that we get a nice kind of warm glow on a kind of afternoon sunset type experience, and that's easy to do as well. We just head over to the lamp settings here, and in fact we can just go over into our node editor if we wanted to, and with the lamp selected I can now select the color that I want here. In here I can also just go and look at that. I can select the color that I want and just make that a little bit kind of, you know, golden orange here, and then I get the light will be adding a bit of an orange glow, a bit of a warm glow to the whole scene. That makes our gold look even better. I think I like it even warmer here, so let's turn it a bit orange, something like this. Yeah, there we go. I think it's coming together. That's what we've got so far. In the next episode, let's have a quick look how we can add that map to the replicator and add another text object like the 101 in front of the DAZ Studio logo, and make sure there's no grass growing underneath that, and make sure we get a little bit more population on top of the DAZ logo. Join me for that. If you find this video helpful, then please feel free to share it with friends, family, and total strangers, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I will see you in the next installment. Take care. Bye bye.